Today, in college, I wasn't very social, I didn't get good grades, I wasn't in a fraternity, I didn't have a girlfriend, and I wasn't very involved in anything. I'm not complaining, though, because I found a faithful girl who would never stop fighting for me. My life is good now, and we live with two cats named Blue and Raz, and I'm planning to pop the question soon. As I mentioned earlier, generic frat parties weren't really for me, but I still wanted to have fun. I mean, who wouldn't, my friends? Ian and Brian were in a similar situation. We spent most weekends killing time in Bryson's dorm. As a result, we took advantage of every opportunity we had to attend parties, and the majority of the ones we were fortunate enough to attend were off campus, meaning they had nothing to do with any of the fraternities or the school itself. One Friday afternoon, Ian texted the group chat to say that the girl he was talking to knew of a party not that far away, and I intended to attract the strangest girls. I'm sure you know which ones I'm referring to. The writer joked that he was refusing to go to some death metal emo anime party, to which I kind of agreed. Ian was quite insistent, though, and persuaded us that this would be a typical party. It's not like we had anything better going on. As we drove to the party, Ian began to complain about the girl he was talking to, saying that she hadn't responded to him for hours. This wasn't shocking given the type of guy Ian was. He was actually quite conflicted and said that he was considering not going at all, which seemed like an overreaction. We were already 30 minutes into the night, so we weren't just going to turn around and go home, so we told him to swallow his pride and not let it ruin the evening. When Callista's profile completely vanished from his phone, we informed him that he had been banned and that she had most likely chosen to go the party with someone else. He pouted the rest of the way, but as soon as we arrived at the party, we knew we had made the correct decision. Ian said he wanted a buzz to distract him from the situation and that he didn't want to enter the house just yet, since it was enormous, particularly in comparison to the other homes on the block. After Ian was satisfied with his buzz, Bryson and I decided to let Chris park a little further down the street so that we could pre-game outside the car. We also watched as people entered the house and droves, and once we got inside, I could tell that something wasn't quite right. First of all the lights were on, like there was no ambient lighting throughout the entire house, just the bright overhead lights that you'd expect to be off at a college party. Most of the people there were very nicely dressed, not what you'd expect to see at a rowdy party. The scene looked more like a fancy dinner party than anything else, but perhaps that's what it was, as we didn't really know what we were walking into. Also, the soundtrack seemed strange. They were playing ethereal, almost druggy music instead of trap hip-hop or any other typical party music. I'm not sure what genre it was or how to characterize it, but all of the songs featured just instruments and no lyrics. It was strange, but I suppose it wasn't horrible in and of itself. My friends and I stared at each other, trying to figure out what was going on. We asked Ian a lot of questions, but he said he didn't know any more than we did. The four of us wandered around the house for a while, and since there was alcohol all over, we helped ourselves. After a few minutes, I noticed that people were staring at me and then turning away right away. It was so obvious that I began to wonder if I had something in my teeth. I assumed that I was just getting attention because of what I was wearing, which made sense to me at the time. In fact, I retract that statement. A few minutes after Chris departed, a group of females approached us. Since we weren't very confident, being approached was a novel experience for us. Chris was rather bored and claimed he was going to go smoke in his vehicle, which we assumed was because he didn't have any alcohol in him. The three of them began flirting with us almost immediately, as if it weren't even subtle. They made a joke about an entrance fee, which I found amusing until I realized they were being serious. They were holding a bottle of tequila, which we weren't going to turn down without much consideration or fear of looking uncool, so we took a swig. From that moment on, the six of us stayed together, drinking, talking, and occasionally dancing. Everything was going great until I noticed a strange mark on Tina's neck. It was a short but solid green line that appeared to have been drawn with a Sharpie. Since I was standing so close to her, I considered asking her about it, but I opted against it since I didn't want to insult her. The line was really thin, and it may have been a birthmark or something. I couldn't help but notice it since it was so strange and green of all hues. Who wears green makeup? It couldn't have been a smudge. I chose to ignore it and kept teasing her, wondering where things would lead. Eventually, I saw Bryson and his girlfriend heading upstairs, which made me pleased. Shortly after that, I saw Ian and his girlfriend heading for the stairs as well. Despite the alcohol, I could feel myself getting really nervous and sweaty, so I was afraid to ask Tina anything suggestive so as not to ruin anything. I told Tina that I was going to the bathroom and that I would be right back. The only bathroom I could find was occupied, so I waited outside the door until it opened, and an extremely tall elderly man wearing a white button-down and linen pants emerged. He knocked into me as I hurried into the restroom. I turned around, sort of expecting him to apologize, but instead he just stood there staring at me. It was the oddest thing ever. He was assessing me with this blank expression, and I was going to say anything when I saw what was on his neck. It was exactly the same green line that I had seen on Tina, against my better judgment. I asked him what was wrong, and he smirked and shook his head before saying, "Who invited you?" I didn't know how to respond, so I blurted out, "Callista," the girl who had stood up Ian. He chuckled and looked up as if he recognized me. He then looked back at me, his smile gone, and said, "Do you see Callista here?" in a low voice. I didn't know how to respond, so I just slammed the door in his face, wondering what the hell had just happened. I couldn't get over what he said, and I couldn't get past that green mark on his neck. I felt bad for not asking him more questions about what on earth was going on. While strolling around the party, I couldn't stop thinking about the green mark, so I strolled past more individuals who looked at me like I didn't belong and didn't care, even though I was planning to locate my friends and pull them out. I began closely examining people's necks to see if anyone else had a mark on them. To my horror, I discovered that 2 more people had green lines on their necks. They were all the same color, length, thickness, and everything. It was freaky. I kept searching for that guy, but fortunately, Bryson and Ian were walking down the stairs. I urged them to follow me, and I took them to an empty hallway so we could talk. I briefly explained my theory to them and said we had to leave right away, and they burst out laughing, telling me I was simply intoxicated. I asked Bryson where his girl had gone, and he told me that she had told him to meet back upstairs in 20 minutes. Ian said that his girl told him the same thing. I told them to follow me and that I would prove that people had strange marks on their necks, but they weren't moving. Just when I was about to give up, Ian turned to the side and I saw something truly horrifying, a thin line on his neck, but this one was red, not green. I practically screamed at him, which made them pay attention. When I looked at Bryson's neck, I saw a red mark there as well. Ian urged me to calm down and that it was probably only a makeup smear, but Bryson began to believe me. I informed them that we were leaving, and Bryson and I turned to find the door. Ian refused to go, stating that he wanted to meet up with the girl again. Just then, a stranger passed by, observing each of us separately. He didn't say anything but paused long enough for us to see the green line on his deck. Bryson and I hurried for the door. Ian closed, and it seemed like everyone was watching us go. No one intervened to stop us, so we ran to Chris's car and instructed him to drive. As we were leaving, both Ian and Bryson's phones began ringing, and the girls asked why we had left and how they could have known that we weren't even present to witness our departure. Everyone I tell this tale to has a wild notion about what occurred that night, and my friends blocked the females. I'm not sure what to make of it, but I don't think I want to know what may have happened if that man hadn't tipped me. Away I began my graduate studies in civil engineering at Harvard University a few months ago. Everything was going well for me. School were going well, I made a few friends, and I had the apartment. I discovered that it was reasonably priced, but the landlord was shady. I had a car and lived a long way from campus, but I enjoyed driving, so I didn't mind that. Everything was pretty normal until the day my backpack was stolen. I had left it on a table in a random hall to use the restroom like a fool, and by the time I returned, it was gone. Of course, that particular lecture hall didn't have cameras, so there was nothing I could do, and I was more irritated than anything else. I had to cancel my cards, get new ones, report my missing keys to the landlord, and begin looking for a replacement laptop. It was a whole lot of trouble, but things happen, and it wasn't until a few days later that I realized the situation was far worse than I had expected. One evening, when I was driving home from campus, I noticed a handwritten note tucked under my door. I assumed it was merely a reminder to my landlord about something, but when I opened it, I was completely mistaken. It simply said, "I see you," with no name or signature. After reading those 3 words, I realized right away that whoever had stolen my backpack had somehow gotten into my laptop and discovered where I lived, which was already terrifying. But then I realized that what was even worse was that they had my apartment keys. My skin began to itch, so I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone there. I ran into my apartment and slammed the door shut because I had a deadlock, so even if someone tried to break in, they wouldn't be able to get past that. Over the course of the following week, I received more handwritten notes. They weren't long, just strange phrases like, "I know what you did," or "watch yourself." I really didn't know what to do, but if someone had looked through my laptop, who knew what they could have discovered? I thought I'd waited a little longer in the hopes that whoever was bothering me would get bored. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed something. It was dark outside and my blinds were partially closed, but I thought I saw a flash, as if someone had taken a picture of me. I hurriedly drew down the blinds, but my heart was pounding. No one was there, and I began to notice small things around my apartment being moved. At first, I thought I was just being careless, because my shoes would be in a different spot, or my coat would be draped over the chair, instead of hung up. However, one day I came home to find my room completely turned upside down, my dresser drawers pulled out, my books scattered all over the floor, and my bedsheet stripped off. I called the police, of course, but they did little to stop it. There was nothing they could do because there was no forced entry or theft, so there wasn't much they could do. Apparently, I asked my landlord to change the locks, but he said it would take at least 2 days to get someone out. I pleaded with him to do it sooner, but he dismissed it, saying it wasn't an emergency. How in the world could this person not have seen that this was an emergency? I felt deceived. Even though there was a deadlock and I was safe, he finally stopped responding to my repeated requests for action, regardless of what I said. As I write this, I barely slept at all last night. I'm considering changing the locks myself, but I'm not sure how I could do that without causing costly damage. Since I'm scared to leave my room, I called off all of my courses this morning. I'm ready to confront whoever it is if they return, and if they looked through my laptop, they would undoubtedly know my class schedule. Perhaps I'll hide somewhere and get the upper hand if they attempt to enter while I'm supposed to be in class. I'll provide an update. I recently broke up with my boyfriend of 2 years, Ben. It wasn't a bad breakup, but it wasn't great either. We had been fighting for months, and it was clear that things weren't going to work out. So when we finally called it quits, I thought it would be best to block him on everything. I attend Temple University, and I live in a small apartment close to campus that is on the 2nd floor of an older building, so I can hear almost everything that goes on outside. A few days after the breakup, I began hearing strange nighttime noises that weren't the usual city sounds. These were different footsteps. The explanation I wasn't actually freaking out was, since Ben was one of the sweetest and most innocent guys there was, in a nice way, like he'd never do anything drastic or anything to hurt me, so I decided to let it go. In addition, I was already stressed out from the breakup, and I had this huge group project to complete, which is actually a huge component of the story. I worked on it all night, making sure everything was perfect, and I emailed it just before midnight relief to have it finished. My professor plugged in his laptop and pulled up the file I had sent. I was anxious, but I was also kind of proud of what we had done, because I had a lot of experience with Adobe products and knew our video was probably a cut above all the other groups. When the video started playing, I was shocked to learn that it wasn't our project. I went to bed trying not to think about all the other things that were going wrong in my life. Instead, there was a blurry video of a person wearing a scream mask that showed them chatting and saying terrible things about me. They weren't simply sitting there, however. My professor, the government, was so disgusting that I don't even want to repeat what was said. It was so sick that he allowed the video to play for a little longer than he should have, probably because he was in shock himself. When he did pause it, though, his face was pale and I was frozen in place. I've never been so embarrassed in my life. I wanted to cry, but I was breathless. I felt hundreds of eyes watching me. The rest of the class was staring at me, and I knew what they were thinking after the most agonizing moments of my life. I broke out in tears and ran out of the lecture hall, feeling like I was about to have a panic attack. I considered leaving, but I knew that if I just went, I would be expelled. So I waited outside the building for the class to end before going up to my professor. I essentially begged him that I had no idea what had happened and that I was certain I had sent the right video, and he agreed, acknowledging that 2 videos had been "My projects came first," followed by the most current one he performed in class. I won't bore you with the specifics, but it took a lot of time and effort to resolve the issue with the university. Although it was obvious that my email had been compromised, which was a much more serious issue, nothing could make the embarrassment go away. Things got worse after I changed my password. A week later, I woke up to find that I had been hacked on Snapchat as well. I don't even want to consider what they discovered. There was a lot of stuff on my Snapchat that I don't feel comfortable talking about. I called the police and told them everything, and to my surprise, Ben agreed to let them question him. The police were able to confirm that Ben wasn't responsible for any of it, but he did admit that he posted my private information on some online forum shortly after our breakup. He swore he never posted any of my passwords, but my passwords were easy to figure out, and I used the same password for everything, which was a dumb move. My best guess is that whoever was harassing me realized I had called the police and were reluctant to risk being caught. I thought that was the end of it, but one day some unknown individual added me on Snapchat, which wasn't too unusual, and when I added them back, they began to send me pictures of me, even though I had blocked them before. Ben wasn't responsible for the hacking, and that's when the full gravitation of the situation hit me. Someone else had practically all of my private information, and they could undoubtedly blackmail me. I changed my passwords right away, but it might have been too late, which I'm sure they were about to do, and I started crying. For about a week, I kept getting random profiles on Snapchat that I knew were from the same person, but I never clicked on their ads because I was afraid they would blackmail me or demand money. I'm sure you can imagine the kinds of things they were sending. This has been going on for a week or so, and I'm at a loss for what to do because there is absolutely no evidence or way for me to track this person down. The police don't have enough information to get involved, and it's not like they could do anything anyway. The worst part is that they actually know my address and every other detail about my personal life, so if I continue to ignore their Snapchat ads, they might do something drastic. They've already lurked outside my apartment, so I wouldn't rule out them going any further. I'm hoping that they grow bored and stop. For any young women reading, please be mindful of the type of images on your phone. I doubt that this will ever come to an end.